Board games, the physical form of video games. I know, it's crazy, right? You may think it's odd and can't be fun as video games, but sometimes they can be way more fun. Sorry, Mousetrap, Catan, Cards Against Humanity. A lot of these are just as fun to play as any video game, and for the most part, much easier to get into with a family than most video games. Sometimes video games can be too much for some people to play and figure out, especially for older people.
What's the A button? I don't know where the A button is.
It's right there on your left, Grandpa. Yeah, Grandpa, it's right here. Just push that and you can end your turn.
Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh boy.
These games can also come cheaper and even work when you have no power. A lot of these games even have one-for-one video game counterparts. But what about video games becoming board games? Sometimes they just license out the titles to popular games like Clue or Uno, but none more so than Monopoly. Monopoly has done so many versions, it's pretty much has done everything from Friends to Marvel. But the one I want to talk about are Zelda related. Zelda has been licensed out to a lot of tabletop games as of late, like a custom chessboard. The chessboard is okay, it's just a normal chessboard with Zelda characters on it. Despite its fancy packaging, the Zelda chess set isn't anything special. The pieces are plastic, and they're all from Ocarina of Time. I figured they'd be metal and have some variety into them, but they don't. That being said, the pieces do look pretty good. What? Checkmate again? Same thing with Zelda Yahtzee. It's just a chest with some colored dice in it, but it does look pretty cool in the packaging. Next on this list is Zelda Clue. Zelda Clue is also quite fun. Again, it's based off Ocarina of Time like pretty much everything else, which makes the pieces all the sages from that game. You got Darunia, Nabu, Raru, Zelda, Impa, and for good measure Link because you have to have the main character. And unlike regular Clue, each of them have their own special ability that you can activate later in the game. The items and locations are also changed up to Ocarina of Time versions, with items like the bow, the hookshot, the master sword. But the biggest add-on to this game is the question mark on the dice. When you roll a question mark, you draw from the monster deck. This will give you one of the boss monsters from Ocarina of Time. Each one will have a different effect on it, like Ganondorf, where if you're the 8th person to draw Ganondorf, you lose, or Bongo Bongo, where an opponent has to show you one of their cards. It's quite fun if you can get a few people to play with you, especially with the new added rules to screw people over.
I think I got it. I guess Link with the Master Sword in the Lost Woods.
Okay, Beans, what's your guess? Oh, come on, how'd you guess that? And now we finally get to Monopoly. Zelda Monopoly is the same thing as regular Monopoly, except it's changed its locations to places in the series. And the locations are picked from everywhere in the series, such as Minish Cap, Link Between Worlds, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Four Swords, Twilight Princess, Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword. And the pieces are different items from the Zelda universe, such as the Hylian Shield, the Ocarina of Time, the Triforce, the Penis, the Arrow. It is a little disappointing that they used paper instead of actual rupees for currency. Now that would have been a cool little touch. What makes Zelda Monopoly a bit different than regular Monopoly is the addition of these event cards, or as the game likes to call them, item cards. Some of the items include the Ocarina of Time, which allows you to return that property to the bank, the Spirit Flute, which tricks your opponent into giving you their best property, or they would have to add on 100 rupees on top of that, or the Phantom Hourglass that steals an opponent's property right after they buy it. Overall, it's pretty fun if you like ruining the lives and friendships you have.
Come on, anything but blue, anything but blue. Shit!
So that's it for the games that use the Zelda branding. But what about games based on the video game? Well, you're in luck because the 80s had two. The Legend of Zelda was made by Milton Bradley, you know, the Yahtzee guys, and was based off the first game. It's very simple, and kind of feels like it was made for young children.
Hey Beans, I got a new game for us to play.
It's a 1 to 4 player game, and you move through 6 dungeons looking for items and fighting enemies through each area, until you get to the 6th area and find Zelda. Each player starts with 3 hearts, and the youngest goes first. All players move the same link. You move by rolling a 6-sided dice that has the numbers 1 to 3 on it. When you move, you either land on a white dot or a yellow square, and you cannot move backwards. When you land on a yellow square, you choose from one of the colored tiles. If it's an item, you can move on. But if it's a monster, everyone fights that monster. In a 4-player game, each person rolls a die with a sword and red square on it. In a 3-player game, the person who flipped the tile gets 2 dice, and the rest get 1. A 2-player game, you split the dice in 2s. In a 1-player game, you roll all the dice. The monster has a number from 1 to 4 on the tile. The players must roll that many swords to beat the monster. If you fail to do so, each player loses a heart. But if you win, you defeat the monster and you move on. If you defeat the monster, each player that rolled a sword gets a new heart. If you lose all your hearts, it's game over for you. To win, you must get to level 6 and find Zelda. In a single player game, when you reveal her tile, you win. But in a multiplayer game, you all roll 4 dice. If you get 4 swords, you win. If not, the next player will have a chance to do this.
And that's the game. It's not very good to be honest, but it is what it is. But there was one more game based on the original Legend of Zelda. But we never got it over here in the West. I guess we're just too stupid or something for it. And that would be Hyrule Fantasy Adventure by Bandai.
First, you set up your subboard and give yourself a wooden sword and 5 heart tokens. Pick a character and place it on the start. When all active players are done, you start the game. To start, you move your piece. You move for how many hearts you have, excluding the damaged ones. So in this case, 5 spaces. The goal is to beat each level in order from 1 to 8 and collect all the Triforce pieces. After you move, you draw a showdown card and battle the monster on that card. It will have an attack power, and you roll a 6-sided die twice, or in this case, 2 die. If you tie or beat the number, you beat it, and you get the reward on the card. If not, do what Law says. Some, like the Zora, require you to have an item to beat them, so if you don't have that magic shield, you automatically lose. There are also event cards, like Falling Boulders, Get 50 Rupees, Lose 50 Rupees, and the Money Making Game. When you get to a level, you do the same, but if you win the fight, you play a Labyrinth card. This card will have a boss on it, and it will tell you what you need to do to win the fight. Some fights will ask you to roll as many dice as hearts you have, excluding the ones that are flipped over, and you have to get an item that's on the die. There are arrows, bombs, recorder, magical rod, sword, and silver arrows. The other is to roll 1 die, and try to get one of 3 items. If you win, flip that level's respective Triforce piece and place it on your subboard, recover your hearts, and head to your next objective. But if you lose, you have to move your character to one of the 2 fairy fountains, where you recover all your hearts. You keep the Labyrinth card until you beat it, and must head back to the level you failed on. After level 2, you must get the White Sword before you can even get into level 3. For me, this is a good time to get the Magic Shield for 100 rupees, and the letter for the potion, which will help later in the game. When you get to this point of the map, things get a little odd compared to the rest of the map. First off, when you move from this square, your movement ends and you do your battle. Second, this arrow here means you can only move in that direction when going left. You cannot go back to the square if you go left here. When you manage to get the blue ring, you add 2 hearts to your subboard. Do not flip over any hearts that are face down. When you complete all the levels and get all the items except for potions, you can now head to Death Mountain and fight Ganon. There, do the same as normal levels, but when you fight Ganon, you roll 4 die no matter what your heart count is. If you roll a sword and a silver arrow, you win the game, and save Zelda and collect both Triforces. If not, go to the Fairy Fountain and head on back. Now there is still a few things I have to explain. First off, is potions. You have 2 types of potions, blue and red. If you use a red potion, it becomes a blue, and if you use a blue, it's used up and you have to go buy a new one. Potions are pretty cool. They prevent you from going to the Fairy Fountain when losing to a boss, so very helpful against Ganon, especially since it's right next to a potion shop. But that's not the only thing they do. If you use one at the start of your turn, you recover all your hearts. So what happens if you draw a money-making game card? Well, you draw from this pile here, the money-making game pile. Starting with the person who drew the money-making game card, you draw until someone gets the lose 50 rupees and gain the 50 rupees cards. If someone gets one of these cards, they skip their draw until the opposite card is drawn. Then, the loser gives the winner 50 rupees, or if the loser doesn't have 50 rupees, the winner takes 50 from the bank. Lastly, if you lose all your hearts, you move yourself back to the start token, and you miss out on your next turn, but you don't lose any rupees or items. And that's how you play the game.
It's honestly a really fun game to play, especially if you can get a couple friends together to play it with you, and the game changes in an instant. See, I was behind like 6 levels recording for this, but by the end of it, I managed to get to Ganon before one of my other friends eventually won the game.
And there is some strategy needed to play. Like, do you go for the next dungeon? Or do you try to save for the blue ring? Do you fly to the dungeon you need? Or do you find one close to a shop? There's a surprising amount of thinking going on in this game. Compared to what we got, this game is 100% better.
But yeah, board games can be just as fun as regular old video games. But it's been so long since we had a board game based on The Legend of Zelda. I think we're due for a new one. Can you imagine one based on Breath of the Wild, or Wind Waker, or even Four Swords? That'd be great!
If you ever get a chance to play these games and can get a few friends together, I would highly recommend trying these games out for yourself.
Well, I've been Neo Citron, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Peace out!
Like what you see? Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to be notified next time I upload. And join my other socials, links in the description below.